We chase success as though it were a sun cresting the edge of our personal horizon. But what if the sun we seek burns beneath the surface, not above it? What if success is not found in the applause of the world, but in the cryptic language of our dreams, the only place the truth dares to speak without shame? You see, what we call ambition often begins as a scar, a wound forgotten by the waking mind, but not by the psyche. The dream does not flatter. It does not pretend. It whispers what the day refuses to confess. Every repressed desire, every humiliation wrapped in silence, every wish disfigured by guilt, these become the architects of our internal striving. In dreams, success is not achievement. It is revenge. It is escape. It is proof we matter where we were once invisible. There is no career that is not, at some level, compensation. Behind every driven man lies a broken boy trying to be seen. Behind every tireless woman, a girl who was once denied voice. Dreams pull this veil aside. They show us the unspoken bargain. If I am successful, maybe I will be safe. Maybe I will not be abandoned again. Maybe I will not be called unworthy, unwanted, unseen. Success, then, is rarely pure. It is a symptom, a sublimation. We transform our forbidden hungers into culturally acceptable forms. We replace the father's neglect with professional validation, the mother's coldness with public warmth, the sibling's betrayal with solitary excellence. Dreams make this substitution visible. They dissolve the disguise. When the dream turns dark, when success is chased and never caught, we are watching ourselves in psychic rehearsal. This is not failure, it is repetition. The unconscious has not yet accepted release. It returns, again and again, to the site of original injury, hoping the outcome will change. But trauma is not linear. It loops, and in that loop, we build the myths of our greatness or our ruin. To understand your dream is to risk confronting your deepest dependency, the need to be needed. What is success, if not an illusion of control, in a world that first made you helpless? We are not as autonomous as we pretend. The unconscious craves recognition more than it craves reality. If a dream tells you you've arrived, but fills you with dread, listen. The soul is not fooled by appearances. Dreams tell us what our ego hides, and they do not lie. They distort, they disguise, they encode, but beneath the riddles, they offer a purity of intention that our waking selves betray. You want to be successful? Then ask, who taught you that you were nothing without it? Whose voice do you still carry, buried in the basement of your mind, repeating, you must become something, or you are nothing? There is no success without self-deception, and there is no self-deception the dream cannot undo. Look closer. That award, that office, that lover, do they satisfy or distract? Freud said we are ruled by what we do not remember. Success is haunted by the very thing it seeks to silence, the unbearable memory of early need unmet, of early love interrupted. You cannot master the world until you have faced the child within. That child does not want money. It does not want fame. It wants to be held, to be mirrored, to be believed. If you chase success without meeting that gaze, your triumph will taste like ash. The dream shows you this. It strips away the fantasy of adulthood and returns you to the unfinished story. The dream is not just memory, it is protest. And so, your dream of success may be a cry, a rebellion against invisibility, or it may be a confession, I do not want this. I am only following the script someone else wrote in my nervous system. I am playing a role to avoid exile. The cost, my authenticity, my rest, my truth. But here is the deeper secret. The dream is not only diagnosis, it is negotiation. It does not merely expose your motives, it offers you a path back, not to comfort, but to wholeness. If you are willing to read its language, if you do not flinch, the dream will show you what you really want beneath the costume of your ambition. Sometimes what it shows you will humiliate the ego. You may dream of failing publicly, being ridiculed, dismissed. That is not prophecy. It is purification. The unconscious is weeding out your false gods. It is daring you to ask, what remains of me if success is taken away? Who am I when I stop performing? Dreams can be ruthless because the unconscious does not care for politeness. It cares for truth. And success that is built on repression is always temporary. You can suppress pain, but the symptom will speak. In anxiety, in compulsive work, in the inability to enjoy what you've earned. The dream reveals the symptom as story, your story. And you must read it or repeat it. Do not look for 10 steps to success. Look for the pattern you've been repeating since childhood. Look for the wound you keep dressing in achievement. Look for the silence in your past that screams through your productivity. That is where your real work begins. Because the truth is, many succeed only to realize they have arrived at the wrong destination. The applause fades, the house is quiet, and the dreams grow louder. They say, "You were always enough. You just didn't believe it. So you chased ghosts. Now, come home." Let your dream teach you not how to succeed, but why, and what for, and whether in the end it is even what you wanted. Freud never claimed that dreams could make us happy, only honest. And sometimes that is the beginning of something far more lasting than success. That is the beginning of waking up. But waking is not the triumph we imagine. It is not illumination bathed in clarity, it is a reckoning. When the unconscious begins to stir, when the dream is no longer dismissed as nonsense, we find ourselves face to face with the debris we've buried under ambition, the grief we silenced, the love we redirected into labor, the rage we disguised as resilience. Waking is grief before it is freedom. To see clearly is to mourn what was lost in the pursuit of becoming. You begin to see how much of your striving was a defense, not a dream. A defense against shame, against insignificance, against the unbearable thought that your existence might not matter unless it performs. But the dream does not perform. It disturbs, and in disturbing it reveals. It returns you to the psychic battlefield where your value was first questioned. And in that return it asks, will you reenact the wound, or will you listen? Success, in its unconscious form, is often a way of escaping the mother's gaze or reclaiming it. We forget how formative it is, the way we were first held, first ignored, first demanded to be something other than we were. The child who senses rejection learns to seduce the world. The child who feels unseen becomes hyper-visible. But the cost is authenticity. The dream will show you where that mask begins to crack. You will see yourself not as the accomplished adult, but as the frightened child constructing identity from fragments. That is the first trauma. Not what was done to you, but what you had to become in order to survive it. The dream reveals that construction, the identity you built out of necessity, not freedom. And so, the symbols that appear in your sleep, the staircase you never reach the top of, the crowd that does not applaud, the voice that cannot speak, these are not random. They are mirrors. Mirrors for the emotional architecture you inhabit. Freud did not decode dreams as puzzles. He listened to them as poetry, unconscious poetry, written in metaphor, in censorship, in displacement. Because the truth is rarely allowed in its raw form. It must be disguised to be tolerated. The dream, then, is the return of the repressed. And what we repress most violently is not our weakness but our longing. Longing to be loved without conditions, longing to rest without guilt, longing to fail and still belong. But success, as society defines it, makes no room for such softness. It demands performance without pause. It rewards the mask, not the face. So we split. A public self that excels, a private self that withers. The dream reunites them not gently but necessarily. It forces a confrontation. It says, here is what you desire. Here is what you fear. Here is what you deny. And until you meet these parts, your success will be haunted by a sense of fraudulence. Because you know, somewhere beneath the applause, that it is not truly you being seen, only the self you built to be safe. This is not pathology, it is strategy. Every neurosis is a negotiation with pain, and dreams are the record of that negotiation. They show you what the ego refuses to believe, that the wound is still bleeding, that the original pain has not been resolved, only relocated from childhood isolation to adult obsession, from the absence of love to the excess of work. And here, Freud's realism becomes clear. There is no escape from suffering, only transformation. We do not become successful to transcend our past, we become conscious to carry it differently. The dream does not free you, it implicates you. It holds a mirror to the part of you that still clings to false salvation. It whispers, "You are chasing success the way a starving man chases bread, but your hunger is not material. It is symbolic, and it cannot be fed by achievement alone. So look again at your dream, not for predictions but for patterns, not for answers but for origins. That failed exam, that collapsing building, that never-ending fall, they are scenes from your psychic autobiography. You wrote them when no one was listening, and now they demand to be heard. Listen carefully. Behind the symbols is a voice. Your voice, before it was censored, before you learned to smile to be loved, before you learned that silence was safer than truth. That voice still speaks. It dreams, it repeats, it resists, not to harm you, but to guide you. The repetition is not madness, it is memory. Memory trying to become conscious. And what we make conscious, we can change. Success, if it is to mean anything, must begin with this listening, not to the market, not to mentors, but to the murmur of your own forgotten life, to the parts of you that never had language. The dream is their language, and when you translate it, something extraordinary happens. Success ceases to be compensation. It becomes expression. You no longer strive to prove, you strive to embody. You no longer fear failure, because failure is no longer exile. You belong to yourself, not to an audience. You become dangerous not because you dominate, but because you no longer obey the unconscious command to disappear behind productivity. This is the final secret the dream reveals, that your worth was never dependent on your success, that the drive to achieve was always a disguised prayer, make me visible, make me real, make me enough. And that prayer is answered not by more doing, but by deeper knowing. The unconscious does not ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be whole, to bring home the orphaned parts, to recognize that your ambition was holy, even when it was mistaken. It came from pain, and it led you here. So do not kill the dream. Translate it. Follow it. Let it show you the map beneath the mask. The dream is your most honest biography, and when you read it well, you begin perhaps for the first time to succeed on your own terms. But that is only the beginning. But to understand success, you must first understand repression, not as denial that would be too conscious, too direct, but as a subtle burial, a forgetting with intention. The unconscious forgets with precision, like a surgeon removing a shard too dangerous to touch. And yet the body remembers, the psyche remembers, the dream remembers. Repression is not failure, it is function. It allows the child to survive what cannot be spoken, to silence what would overwhelm. But it has a cost. What is buried does not disappear, it changes form. It becomes symptom, and in adults, it becomes drive. The same force that pushes you towards success may be the residue of an earlier terror, the terror of being unloved, the terror of being ordinary, the terror of being nothing at all. This is the truth we resist. Our most brilliant accomplishments may be rooted in ancient fear, a fear so familiar we confuse it with personality. You say, "I'm ambitious." But what if ambition is just grief, running forward in a mask? And yet, and this is essential, the unconscious is not cruel. It is protective. The psyche does not repress to punish. It represses to preserve coherence, to protect the self from fragmentation. But the very mechanisms that once kept us alive begin to distort us when we remain unconscious of them. This is why the dream returns. To interrupt the repetition, to remind you that your life is not being lived by accident, but by pattern, and that pattern is always loyal to a wound, until it is made conscious. But here is the tragedy. Most do not want to know. Knowing demands mourning. It means letting go of the fantasy that success will save you, that if you just climb high enough, earn enough, impress enough, the ache will vanish. It won't, because the ache was never about the world. It was about your first relationships, your first mirror, and success cannot rewrite the past. It can only sedate the present. The unconscious does not want sedation. It wants integration. It wants the truth not as concept, but as confrontation. You must ask, what have I built my life to avoid feeling? Whose absence am I still trying to fill with achievement? Whose love am I still trying to earn through excellence? These are not academic questions. They are the foundation of psychoanalytic healing. Success is not wrong. It is incomplete. And when we worship it, we lose ourselves to an external script, a script written by a culture that prizes image over authenticity, outcome over origin. But the dream will not let you forget your origin. It is the residue of your original self, unsocialized, uncensored, unashamed. It is there that your true desire hides. Not desire as consumerism paints it, but desire as truth, the yearning for connection without performance, the longing to be seen in your entirety, even in your ruin. The reason so many are afraid to succeed fully is because success exposes them. It removes the chase, and in the stillness, the old emptiness returns. You cannot run from your past forever. The body will remember. The psyche will interrupt. The dream will awaken you at 3:17 a.m. and ask, "What are you really afraid of?" And you will not answer immediately. The answer will not come in language. It will come in tears you do not understand, in anxiety without cause, in a numbness that won't lift. That is the voice of repression failing. It is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. But only if you listen. Most people don't. They medicate, they spiritualize, they optimize, they refuse to descend. But there is no ascent without descent. Freud knew this. Jung followed it. Camus named its absurdity. The descent is where the soul remembers, where success ceases to be compensation and begins to become expression. To reach that, you must be willing to fail. Not in public, that is easy, but in private. You must let the false self collapse. You must disappoint the image you built to survive. And in that disappointment, find something stranger, something terrifying, something real. The real self is not successful. It is fractured. It is unfinished. It is contradictory. But it is alive. And it is only when that self is welcomed, not fixed, not improved, but welcomed, that the pursuit of success transforms. It becomes a mirror, not a mask. It becomes the outer shape of an inner coherence. You work not to prove, but to participate in your own becoming. You succeed not to be loved, but because you already are. And in this, the dream finally changes. No longer a scream, no longer a trap, but a dialogue, a sacred return. The unconscious begins to trust the ego again. The split narrows. The symptom softens. The body exhales. You begin to dream differently. Not of running, but of arriving. Not of applause, but of silence. And in that silence, you meet the only success worth having. The success of being able to live with yourself fully, honestly, completely without disguise. But there is a gatekeeper to this descent, one that Freud named with clinical precision, the superego. It is not morality. It is not conscience. It is cruelty dressed as duty. It is the internalized voice of those we once depended on, now lodged in the psyche like broken glass. And it does not whisper, it commands. Achieve. Be better. Be more. Be quiet. The superego is the ghost of early authority, still speaking long after the speaker has vanished. Its voice is sharp, familiar, inescapable. You think it is your own, but it is not. It was installed before you had the power to object. It is your earliest emotional debt, and you are still paying interest. When you resist rest, when you punish yourself for failing, when you sabotage joy, that is the superego in motion, not because it wants you to grow, because it cannot tolerate your softness. Because somewhere long ago, love was conditional. Attention came with cost. So now, you preempt rejection by rejecting yourself. This is why success feels hollow. Because it is not yours, it is the superego's. It is fulfillment of someone else's measure, a dead father's expectations, a mother's silent disappointment, a teacher's subtle disdain. You thought you were becoming free, but you were becoming obedient. The unconscious does not obey. It resists. It rebels in symptom, in repetition, in dreams. That tension between the ego's compliance and the unconscious's revolt is what Freud called neurosis. A divided self, a secret conflict. You say yes, but your body says no. You smile, but you cannot feel. You win, but you feel like a fraud. This is not pathology. This is history. Every symptom is a survival strategy that outlived its context. Perfectionism was once protection. Anxiety was once vigilance. Numbness was once mercy. The unconscious is not malfunctioning, it is remembering. But here lies the hardest truth. You are not only the victim of the superego, you are also its enforcer. You repeat the voices that once hurt you, not out of malice, but out of loyalty, psychic loyalty. The child believes, if I become like them, I will be loved by them. So you mimic the harshness, you internalize the judgment, and you pass it forward to your work, to your children, to yourself. Breaking this inheritance is the real success. Not wealth, not fame, but disobedience, deep, internal disobedience. The courage to say, this voice is not mine, this measure is not mine, this hunger is not mine, and then to wait, to listen, to mourn, because something will die in that moment. Not you, but the version of you that was built to please, to perform, to protect others from your truth. That false self will tremble. It will beg to return. It will call you lazy, ungrateful, selfish. It will accuse you of betraying the family, the lineage, the culture. And in a way, it's right. Because healing is betrayal of the lie that love must be earned. Freud understood this. He did not offer comfort. He offered confrontation. He did not promise peace. He promised clarity, and clarity burns. But it is only through that fire that the psyche becomes whole. We carry within us an entire cast of internal figures, the mother, the father, the judge, the child. Success, in the psychoanalytic sense, means bringing them into dialogue, not letting one dominate. When the superego rules unchecked, we become brilliant but brittle. When the id overtakes, we become impulsive, lost in regression. When the ego hides, we feel like imposters in our own lives. But when they speak, truly speak, something shifts. You no longer confuse productivity with worth. You no longer obey the ancestral ghost. You begin to ask, what is mine? What do I want, apart from what I was told to want? This is not selfishness. It is individuation. It is psychic maturity. And it is rare. Most people live out scripts they did not write. They inherit pain like property. They call it identity. They call it legacy. But it is grief. And unless that grief is metabolized, it becomes destiny. Dreams do not show you your future. They show you your inheritance, the raw material of your becoming. If you do not work with it consciously, it will shape your life unconsciously. That is the law of the psyche. Not punishment, but repetition. You will keep meeting the same dynamic in different disguises until you face the source. And facing the source is painful. It means revisiting the scenes you swore you'd never return to. It means letting the inner child speak not through success, but through sorrow, through rage, through need. This is what most therapies avoid. They soothe the symptom but leave the system intact. But Freud was not interested in soothing. He was interested in the soul's structure. And the soul, like the dream, is not polite. It is raw. It is wild. It does not care about your resume. It wants your truth. And so, the final phase begins not ascension, but integration. To hold the wound without performance. To carry your story without becoming it. To let success become an echo of inner coherence, not a cover for inner fracture. You become ordinary. That is the real miracle. Ordinary but alive. Ordinary but awake. Ordinary but no longer at war with yourself. You do not become yourself alone. The psyche is not a solitary invention. It is relational, forged in the gaze of the other. The mother's gaze, the father's touch, the sibling's rivalry, the lover's absence, all are mirrors and all distort. From these early mirrors, we construct the scaffolding of the self, but we do so in the dark. We build not what is true, but what is tolerated. And so, success becomes a mirror too, one that reflects not who you are, but who you needed to be to receive love, or attention, or safety. You call it a dream, but look closer. Often, it is a defense, a translation of early longing into socially sanctioned ambition. But the soul does not forget its first language. That need for intimacy, that longing for connection not earned by performance, it doesn't vanish. It goes underground. It surfaces in transference. This is the next betrayal. You think you are chasing achievement, but what you are really chasing is a parent, a lost bond, a missed attunement. And so you recreate it with a boss, a mentor, a partner. You succeed, and you wait for the voice to say, "I see you now. I love you now. You are enough now." But the voice never comes, because it's not theirs to give. This is transference, the repetition of past relationships in present settings. It is not a flaw, it is the unconscious trying to resolve what once broke it. But most never recognize the pattern. They confuse authority with love, power with redemption, approval with safety. And so, they remain children in adult bodies, chasing promotion as if it were a hug. This is not weakness. This is the psychic cost of unmet need. And this is why intimacy terrifies the successful. Because real intimacy does not care about your status. It sees beyond the armor. It touches the parts of you that were hidden for survival. And in that touch, the mask begins to slip. That's why many choose the crowd over the intimate, the speech over the confession, the role over the risk. Because to be loved without pretense is to face the unbearable thought, maybe I didn't need to work so hard to be worthy. Maybe I was already enough before the degrees, before the titles, before the performance. But if that's true, then what was all this for? The mind resists this, because it would mean grieving the years spent striving under a false premise. It would mean confronting the loss of a life lived for someone else's approval, and that grief is enormous. It is not just personal, it is ancestral. You inherited more than genetics. You inherited patterns, you inherited silence, you inherited unspoken rules. Don't feel too much, don't need too much, don't rest, don't fail, be strong, be perfect, be useful. You learn to succeed not as a celebration of self, but as a way to belong. A child does not need instruction to internalize these rules. A raised eyebrow is enough, a sigh, a withheld smile. Love was there, but it had conditions, and the child became a performer. The performance worked, but the cost was intimacy, because intimacy requires exposure, and exposure risks rejection. And the one thing the performer cannot tolerate is being seen, and still not being chosen. So they hide, they work, they achieve, and they call it success. But it is exile. It is exile from the original self, the one that felt, the one that asked, the one that cried. And the longer the exile, the more the performance hardens into identity. You forget the mask is a mask, until the dream breaks it, until the symptom erupts, until the relationship collapses. And then you are left with the fragments, not a failure but a return. A return to the question that was never answered, who am I when I am not performing? The answer does not come quickly. It is not a slogan. It is a process of unbecoming, of peeling away the layers of loyalty to parents, to systems, to stories that were never yours. And as you peel, something softer emerges. Not the powerful self, the vulnerable one, the scared one, the real one. That self is not productive. It is not impressive. But it is the only one that can love and be loved, because it no longer needs to earn it. This is where success transforms. Not in what it looks like, but in what it means. It no longer proves your worth. It reflects your wholeness. You no longer pursue to escape, but to express. You no longer sacrifice connection for the illusion of control. You let go of the superego's whip, and you begin to listen to something quieter, something older than fear. Your own rhythm, your own truth. And in that truth, you find others. Not followers, not admirers, but equals. Souls who are also descending, also stripping the mask, also risking real life after performance. In them, you find what the applause never gave you, presence. And in that presence, you are home. So in the end, what does success mean? Not what you thought. Not the high place, not the loud name, not the immunity from suffering. Success, in the deepest Freudian sense, is not triumph over the unconscious but reconciliation with it, not victory over fear but intimacy with it. It is not the erasure of the wound, but the ability to carry it without becoming it, to live with your ghosts without letting them speak for you. You do not heal by rising above. You heal by sinking in slowly, consciously, without anesthesia. You go back to the places you buried. You let the lost voices speak. You let the parts you exiled return, and you do not silence them again. That is integration. That is maturity. Not wholeness as perfection, but wholeness as ownership. This is me, all of it, the brilliance, the terror, the tenderness, the shame, the desire. I do not divide myself to be loved. I do not shrink myself to be safe. I do not perform myself to be real. I live as I am flawed, fractured, still becoming. And I call that success, because nothing is harder than becoming honest. Not honest as confession, but honest as structure. Honest in how you speak, how you love, how you fail, how you rest. This honesty does not make you popular. It makes you free. Free from the ancestral scripts. Free from compulsive proving. Free from the hunger that no applause could satisfy. And when you are free, you do not need to dominate the world. You begin to participate in it. You create, not to fill a void, but to share your fullness. You rest, not as reward, but as right. You succeed, not as redemption, but as reflection of who you are, not who you pretended to be. You still strive, but differently, without panic, without punishment, without the child inside whispering, "Please see me." You've already been seen, by yourself, and you did not look away. That is what no title can give you, and no failure can take. The dream is quiet now, not because it stopped speaking, but because you finally listened, and you answered, not with ambition, not with denial, but with presence. So if you ask me what is the true measure of success, it is not how far you've gone. It is how closely you've returned to the place you began. But this time, awake. This time, whole. This time, no longer afraid of the dark. Because you know, the dark was never the enemy. It was the entrance. And you have come home.